Like we've actually seen the end of You. Yes, that's right. The disgraced TV star who apparently is still naturally recovering from this debacle that he found himself in. Difficult times, as one can imagine right now over here, particularly for the British media. One scandal after another. Firstly, we had the ITV star Philip Schofield, host of This Morning. He had to resign through, shall we say, a disgraced venture. We'll leave it there. And then on the back of that, we had the man who was literally the voice of BBC News, Hugh Edwards, who, well, hosted everything from the King's coronation, the Platinum Jubilee, and sadly, of course, the demise of our wonderful monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. But where is the story now? Fascinating stuff, as you can imagine, because all it is literally gone underground. Have you noticed, you see, if you watch this channel on a regular basis, we tell you the news, literally as we find it, impartial, fair and balanced. But what's interesting with the mainstream media is when it's one of their own, they just lock down, they stop with the reporting. And the usual fracas comes forward about mental health. But what about the mental health, for instance, of, say, Donald Trump? Whether you like him or not, the verbal attacks, the reports every single day. Likewise over here, the former British Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson, still banging on about Partygate and text messages, even though the public themselves are sick to the back teeth of it and want to move on out of this cost of living crisis. A far bigger scandal for Tim Davie at the BBC is this: Hugh Edwards, and what to do when Hugh decides to finally come out of hiding, Ayla Norma Desmond making his big return. Or is he? What we can tell you first, and exclusive here on the show, is there's a problem now because, as we know, Hugh was the main anchor for the BBC's News at 10, a prestigious slot that all newsreaders within the BBC wish to take over. And as you can imagine, since his demise, out of that particular slot, they've all been circling like vultures. All the while, of course, putting on social media how they wish him well and they hope that, people will give him the space. What they really mean by that is the space to move off so that they can take over. But according to a very good source, Tim Davie, as I say, the BBC Director General, has a huge problem on his hands because he simply cannot parachute him back in without an explanation. Now, so far, we have no explanation other than the report that was put out by his very dedicated wife, Mr. Edwards' wife, I might point out, that is. Naturally, within the mainstream media, there's lots of support because either many people have worked with Hugh throughout the years or indeed his wife, who is a former producer. But what's fascinating now is who gets the top job. What we can tell you first and as ever exclusively here on the show is it could be some time, if ever, that Mr. Edwards makes a return. My surmise is simply this, that Hugh would be very nicely asked to take something of a sabbatical, perhaps to find himself, and more importantly, perhaps look at retirement at the ripe old age of 61. The bigger problem for the BBC is this: they don't necessarily want to have to pay a huge payout because that will come out of the public coffers and that will be seen as bad form also. But moving forward, Hugh, who's still clinging on to the job, and according to a very good source, still being paid his weekly salary, more importantly, well, he's going nowhere. And somebody somehow has to make a decision. It's difficult times for the BBC and the media in the mainstream as ever. And as ever, it's a developing story. When I know more, you'll know more first. Literally more than the mainstream media. Neil Sean in the very heart of London.